A source says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has approved an emerging ceasefire deal with Hezbollah in principle. The source says details are still being negotiated and will need to be approved by the Israeli cabinet. This as the death toll climbs in Lebanon. Lebanese officials say dozens were killed in Israeli strikes in Beirut and beyond over the weekend. Lebanon's health ministry says Israeli strikes have killed more than 3,000 people since mid-September. The IDF says it struck 12 Hezbollah command centres in Beirut's southern suburbs on Sunday night. Meanwhile, Hezbollah fired some 250 projectiles from Lebanon on Sunday. Some were intercepted by Israel's air defences. CNN's Nic Robertson joins us now from Jerusalem. I mean, it isn't a done deal, is it? But they appear to be making progress.
They appear to be making progress, Max, and they appear, all caveats here, that this is perhaps the closest the Israeli government and Hezbollah, through the intermediaries, through the help of US negotiation, have actually come to getting a ceasefire in place here. We have from the Prime Minister's office here saying that in principle there's an agreement that follows a cabinet meeting last night where Netanyahu met with his with senior cabinet members and his top security officials, and also from another source in the region saying that they believe that the deal is getting close. Now, there are issues, and the primary concern that we've understood from the Israeli side all along is that if this 60-day ceasefire, which is the principal part of the negotiations as we understand them, if that gets up and running, Israel wants the right to strike back if Hezbollah breaks the terms of the ceasefire. This appears to be one of the areas that they are still not convinced that the language is right. They still have issues that they want to see resolved, or that aren't resolved fully clearly for them yet. So this is positive, and I think then when you look at those 250 incoming missiles from Hezbollah yesterday and over the weekend, more than 84 civilians killed inside of Lebanon and more than 200 injured just over the weekend, and the real uptick that we've seen in strikes in the heart of Beirut itself, as well as those strikes targeting Hezbollah command and control centers in the south of Beirut. An attempted, it appeared over the weekend, assassination attempt that didn't work on a senior Hezbollah commander by the IDF. All of that, it looks like you've got a massive up-tempo in the war. This is not atypical when talks are coming to an apparent conclusion. Look back at the war in 2006. There was an uptick in escalations in rocket fire and IDF strikes into Lebanon at the time. So it appears that we're in a more positive position. More work to be done, though, yet, Max.
Is it as positive from the Hezbollah side? I mean, what are we hearing from there?
You know, the last we heard directly from a senior Hezbollah figure was earlier in the week, and he said, look, we're going to keep fighting on the battlefield. We will also keep negotiating. Israel shouldn't think that it can take things in negotiations that it can't take on the battlefield. So they're battle ready. But I think the principal understanding that's emerged from Hezbollah over the past couple of weeks is this the statement that even prior to the war, they had indicated that they were ready to de-link their war on Israel's northern border with Hamas's fight in Gaza against the IDF. And that had been the principal guiding factor for Hezbollah to be in the fight, to keep staying in the fight. But when they indicated that, it shows that the war can continue in Gaza and they can come to a separate ceasefire in the north. And that is an important position to be in. And look, there are political gains here for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. If he gets to return those 60,000 people that were evacuated from the northern border, that's a big political plus for him at a time when he is taking some political heat, particularly, on the question of how did the war with Hamas begin last year. A lot of people in the country want an investigation, and he's the one principally pushing back on that, Max.
OK, Nick, in Jerusalem, thank you so much. Let's take a closer look at a potential ceasefire. Jasmine Al-Gamal is a Middle East analyst, a former Middle East advisor to the Pentagon. She joins us now from London. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, the headline sounds very strong, doesn't it? An agreement in principle. But it's all the detail that's been holding up agreements elsewhere, for example.
Absolutely, that's right. I mean, we've heard this for months with the ceasefire negotiations in Gaza. We know that U.S. officials and other officials had been telling us for months that a deal was close to being signed when actually that was very far from the truth. So I take these updates with a grain of salt, but however, there is reason to be cautiously optimistic when it comes to a deal being made in the next few days. There are a couple of things to watch out for in terms of the diplomacy behind the scenes that's happening. The president's envoy to Lebanon, Amos Hochstein, who's been back and forth now for months trying to get this deal, has basically said reportedly to the Israelis through the Israeli ambassador in Washington that if Israel doesn't move close to a deal in the next few days, that he's going to walk away from these talks. We also know that the Pentagon's top Middle East official, Dan Shapiro, who was also a former U.S. ambassador in Israel, is going to be in Israel talking to Israeli officials trying to get this deal through. And the argument that the Americans are going to be making is the following. You have decimated Hezbollah. You have not destroyed it completely, but you have weakened it to a position that it really hasn't been before in recent history. And you now have still 60,000 Israelis who are displaced from their homes in the north. You've sent an incredibly strong message to Iran time and again over the last few months. Now is the time to call it a win and take a deal.
What do you think is the sticking point for Israel in this deal? When they say has to be ironed out, what are the specific things they're most concerned about?
Well, obviously, the thing that they're concerned about is continued rocket fire from Hezbollah into Israeli cities and also rearmament, so smuggling of weapons into Hezbollah's areas in the south of Lebanon, which has happened over the years. It happened after the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah. You saw Hezbollah after that war still continuing to receive weapons that were being smuggled from Iran via Syria into Lebanon. And that's something that Israel doesn't want to see again. That said, again, like I said, the Israelis have basically weakened Hezbollah to a point where it is going to be much more difficult for them to continue to do the kinds of things that they were doing before to rearm and strengthen themselves again. If anything, the sticking points are actually on the Lebanese side, because what this deal stipulates is that the Israelis have 60 days to start withdrawing back from the Lebanese borders, for Hezbollah to move its arms to the north of the Litani River, and for the Lebanese army to start taking responsibility for overseeing some of these stipulations in the deal, making sure that Hezbollah doesn't rearm. The Lebanese side is saying now that they want that 60-day window to be immediate. They want to see an immediate withdrawal by the Israelis as opposed to a 60-day period. The other main sticking point is that the Israelis have asked for assurances from the Americans that they could still fire at Hezbollah positions if they felt that there was reason to, even after the ceasefire deal has been inked. And that's something that the Lebanese side is kind of balking over as well. Those are kind of similar to the sticking points that were there between Hamas and Israel when it came to signing that ceasefire deal in Gaza. The fact that Israel wanted to remain able to strike after a ceasefire deal was signed if they thought it was necessary, with, of course, the other side saying absolutely not. A ceasefire deal is a ceasefire deal. It means you stop firing, full stop.
Where's Iran in all this? We can't really talk about Hezbollah without talking about Iran. They'll be involved in all of this, won't they?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And of course, you would assume that Hezbollah wouldn't be as far advanced in these talks, and the Lebanese state in general would not be advanced this far in the talks without Iranian approval. So suffice it to say, the Iranians are okay with this deal being signed. But of course, as we know, and as we've seen over months and years in the region, just because the deal is signed doesn't mean the sides are not going to continue to try to weaken each other in other ways. And that's what each side is trying to guarantee for themselves right now when they sign this deal, is to make sure that when the deal is signed, that the other side isn't able to continue with the type of behavior that is seen as a threat by one side or the other. So those are the sticking points. Like I said, cautiously optimistic, but still a lot of details to be worked out in these final days.
Well, we'll take any positivity we can. Jasmine El Gamal, really appreciate your time today.